Long ago, in a small village nestled between the rolling hills and dense forests of West Africa, there lived a woman named Adisa. She was known throughout the land for her beauty, wisdom, and kindness. Adisa was married to a hunter named Jabari, a man of great strength and skill, and together they had a daughter named Amina, who was as radiant as the morning sun. The village prospered under the watchful eyes of the ancestors, and life was peaceful. But as the elders often say, even the calmest river hides dangerous currents. One day, a strange wind began to blow through the village, carrying whispers of discontent and mistrust. Rumors spread like wildfire, and soon the once unified village found itself divided. Crops failed, hunters returned empty-handed, and the villagers grew restless. The village chief, an elderly man named Bwana, sought counsel from the ancestors, but their voices were silent. Desperate for guidance, the villagers turned to Adisa, believing that her wisdom could uncover the source of their misfortune. Adisa prayed under the ancient baobab tree, seeking answers in the quiet rustle of the leaves. That night, she dreamed of a golden calabash hidden deep within the forbidden forest. In the dream, a voice whispered, "Only with the golden calabash will harmony be restored. But beware, for the journey is fraught with peril." Determined to save her people, Adisa set out at dawn, armed only with her courage and the blessings of her ancestors. The forest was dense, filled with unseen dangers, twisting vines, prowling beasts, and eerie shadows that seemed to follow her every step. As she ventured deeper, she encountered a cunning trickster spirit who offered to lead her to the calabash in exchange for her most cherished memory. Adisa refused, knowing that memories held the essence of one's soul. She pressed on, facing trials that tested her strength and resolve. At a river guarded by a great serpent, she sang an ancient lullaby, soothing the beast and crossing safely. In a grove of whispering trees, she listened to their secrets, learning the path to the hidden calabash. Finally, in the heart of the forest, she found the golden calabash nestled within the roots of an ancient tree. As she reached for it, a shadowy figure emerged, the spirit of discord that had sown division among her people. It warned her that taking the calabash would require a sacrifice. Without hesitation, Adisa offered her own voice, knowing that wisdom did not need words to be heard. The spirit vanished, and the golden calabash shone brightly in her hands. Returning to the village, Adisa held the calabash high. A golden light spread through the land, restoring balance and unity. Crops flourished, hunters returned with game, and the whispers of mistrust faded. Though Adisa could no longer speak, her wisdom resonated more powerfully than ever, and her people honored her sacrifice for generations to come. Thus, the tale of Adisa and the golden calabash became a legend, a reminder that true wisdom, courage, and selflessness could heal even the deepest wounds. The stranger's arrival one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the village, a mysterious traveler appeared at the edge of the cobbled street. He was tall, with a striking presence that commanded attention. His hair, dark as midnight, framed his chiseled face, and his deep-set eyes gleamed with a magnetic intensity that seemed to pierce through to the very soul. He wore clothes of fine, unfamiliar fabric, adorned with intricate patterns that spoke of distant lands, and his voice, smooth as honey and rich with an exotic accent, carried a melodic cadence as he introduced himself. "My name is Dauda," he announced, his voice carrying on the cool evening breeze. "I am a trader from a faraway kingdom, seeking refuge for the night." The villagers, eager to welcome a stranger with such an air of mystery, quickly gathered around him, intrigued by the allure he exuded. As was customary in their village, they offered him food, drink, and shelter. Their hospitality knew no bounds, for they believed that kindness toward travelers would ensure prosperity and good fortune. Dauda accepted their generosity with grace, his smile warm and disarming. As he settled in, the villagers were eager to hear tales of the distant lands he had visited. Over dinner, Dauda spun stories of places that seemed otherworldly, vast deserts where the sun never set, bustling markets where rare spices and jewels flowed like rivers, and mighty rivers that carried boats larger than their entire village. His stories were not only vivid but alive, drawing the villagers into the worlds he painted with his words. Soon, the nights were filled with his songs, melodies that carried a strange, enchanting quality. His voice, rich and hypnotic, weaved through the air like the gentle hum of a lullaby, evoking emotions that stirred something deep within the hearts of the villagers. Many felt a sense of longing after hearing his songs, as if the melodies unlocked memories of things they couldn't name or places they had never visited. But it wasn't just his tales and music that won their hearts. Dauda also offered gifts, rare trinkets and objects that seemed to carry a certain mystique. Hand-carved wooden figurines that depicted gods from forgotten pantheons, shimmering stones that glinted like the night sky, and delicate fabrics woven with patterns unknown to the villagers. His generosity seemed boundless, and the villagers showered him with gratitude, convinced that he was a man of great wealth and kindness. However, while Dauda basked in the warmth of their affection, there was a sharpness in his eyes that few noticed. Behind his charming smile, Dauda harbored a dark secret. His outward persona was a carefully constructed mask, one that hid the true nature of his being. He was not merely a traitor, he was a trickster, a man who thrived on manipulating the hearts and minds of others. His arrival was no accident, it was part of a carefully laid plan to sow discord and chaos, to unravel the harmony that had long existed within the village. For beneath the songs and stories, Dauda was planting seeds of envy and mistrust. He pitted villagers against each other with subtle remarks, leading them to question each other's loyalties and relationships. A slight here, a half-joking comment there, each word and gesture was calculated to create tension and division. Over time, small rifts began to form, unnoticed at first, but growing larger as his influence spread. Dauda knew that once the village was fractured, he could strike with greater force. He fed off the chaos, the uncertainty, and the fear that his words and actions stirred. The village, once united by a common bond, was now a simmering cauldron of suspicion, and Dauda was the spark that would ignite it all. Yet, not everyone in the village was so easily swayed. Some began to sense that something was amiss. A few villagers, who had lived through their own trials, began to notice the changes, how people had grown colder, how the once joyous gatherings were now tinged with bitterness. They whispered to one another, wondering if Dauda was as he seemed or if he had a hidden agenda. As the days passed, the village would soon realize that Dauda's true purpose was not to trade or to entertain, but to unravel the very fabric of their community. And when the time came, he would reveal his true nature in a way that no one could have foreseen, leaving them to wonder if they had ever really known him at all. Dauda quickly observed the deep bond between Adisa and her husband, Jabari. Their love was pure, the kind that was rare in a world often full of hardship, and the villagers admired them for it. Whenever the couple passed through the village, hand in hand or exchanging quiet smiles, people would murmur in admiration, remarking on their strength as a pair. This closeness, this harmony, irritated Dauda. He despised seeing something so perfect and untouched by his influence. He believed that true power came from control and disruption, not harmony, and he was determined to tear apart what had been so effortlessly woven together. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the village, Adisa went down to the river to fetch water. The task was one she performed daily, and though it was a simple chore, it provided her with moments of peace. It was there, at the water's edge, where Dauda chose to make his move. He had been watching her from a distance, waiting for the right moment to strike. His footsteps were light on the soft earth, and his approach was nearly silent. "Adisa," Dauda said softly, his voice carrying across the stillness of the river, "I couldn't help but notice how tirelessly you work, day after day, while your husband spends his hours hunting in the forest. Does he truly appreciate you? Does he understand the weight of all that you do for your family?" Adisa turned, startled by the sudden presence of the traveler, but there was nothing in his face but sympathy, nothing in his tone but concern. The weight of his words, however, was already sinking in. I don't understand, she said, frowning slightly as she set the water jug down by her side. Jabari is a good man. He provides for us, for me and the children. He loves us dearly. What more could I ask for? Dauda's smile deepened, a knowing glint in his eyes. Perhaps. Perhaps he is a good man, but even the strongest trees can be felled by a single axe, he murmured, his words hanging in the air like a cryptic riddle. Adisa stared at him, feeling a coldness creep over her skin, though the evening sun still warmed the earth. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. She knew it was foolish to let his words get under her skin, but something about the way he spoke, the way he framed it, left her unsettled. Dauda's smile grew more sly, his eyes sharp and calculating. A tree can stand tall for years, its roots deep in the soil, but one swing of the axe, one misstep, and it can all come crashing down. You must ask yourself, Adisa. Does your husband value you as much as you value him? With those words, Dauda turned and walked away, leaving Adisa to stand alone, staring at the ripples in the river as they spread out from the place where the water had once been still. His words clung to her, refusing to fade. That night, Adisa returned home with the jug of water balanced carefully on her head, but the weight in her heart was heavier than she had ever known. She didn't speak of the encounter with Dauda to Jabari. There was no need, no reason to worry him with the fleeting words of a stranger. But, as she laid in bed beside him, the silence felt different. Jabari was close, his breathing steady, but there was an unease in the space between them that hadn't been there before. Days passed, and Dauda's words began to echo in her mind more persistently. She began to observe small things, subtle shifts in Jabari's behavior. He had always been a dedicated hunter, but now, he returned from the forest later than usual, his clothes damp with the scent of rain rather than the woods. Sometimes, his gaze seemed distant, as though his thoughts were elsewhere. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, she tried to draw him out of his thoughts. Jabari, she said softly, is everything well in the forest? You've been gone longer lately. He looked up at her with a warm smile, but there was a shadow behind his eyes. The hunting is fine, he replied, though his voice seemed distracted. It's just been harder lately. But I'll manage. You don't need to worry about me. Adisa felt her heart tighten. His reassurance should have calmed her, but instead, the weight of doubt only grew heavier. She had always trusted Jabari, trusted that he would never falter, that his love for her would never waver. But now, every small sign of distance or distraction seemed to be confirmation of Dauda's words. Could it be true? Was he taking her love for granted? Or was it just her imagination, twisting his every action into something it wasn't? The seed Dauda had planted was beginning to take root. Though she tried to ignore it, the doubt continued to gnaw at her, feeding on her insecurities. The more she tried to push it away, the more it lingered, an uninvited guest in the heart of her home. And Dauda, ever watchful, knew that the seed he had sown was beginning to sprout. Soon, he thought, the roots of their trust would be shaken, and the destruction he had planned would come to fruition. All it would take now was time. Time and the fragile thread of doubt. It was in the stillness of the night that Adisa's world began to unravel. She awoke with a sudden sense of unease, as if something was not right. The moonlight filtered through the small gaps in the walls of their hut, casting long shadows across the room. Her eyes immediately sought Jabari's side of the bed, only to find it cold and empty. Her heart skipped a beat, a cold knot of fear tightening in her chest. Jabari never left the bed at night unless there was an urgent reason. She lay still, listening for any sound, but the hut was eerily silent. Adisa's breath quickened as she sat up, the faintest whisper of worry growing louder in her mind. Where could he be? She rose quietly, tiptoeing across the floor, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Her fingers brushed against the doorway, and she hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to stay or go. But the need to find him, to make sure he was safe, pushed her forward. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, the village was shrouded in an almost unnatural quiet. The stars overhead were bright, but the night seemed still, too still. It wasn't until she caught sight of a dim light flickering from their daughter Amina's hut that the first inkling of dread truly took hold. The light was faint, the glow of a single candle struggling against the darkness, casting strange shadows on the ground. Adisa's stomach churned as she approached, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't push away. What could they be doing at this hour? A sense of urgency drove her forward, even as the fear in her chest grew. When she reached the hut, she pushed the door open without thinking, and the sight that greeted her shattered her world. There, in the flickering candlelight, were Jabari and Amina. Their arms were wrapped around each other, their faces so close that their lips nearly touched. Amina's eyes were closed, and Jabari's hand was resting lightly on her back, his face tilted toward hers in a way that could only be described as intimate. Adisa's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Her mind refused to process what she was seeing. No. This can't be real. It must be a mistake. But there was no mistaking the image before her. Jabari, the man she had loved for years, the father of her children, was locked in a forbidden embrace with their own daughter. A scream tore itself from her throat before she could stop it, a sound filled with the raw anguish of betrayal. It was a scream that echoed through the night, waking the entire village, shattering the stillness with its terror and heartbreak. Jabari and Amina broke apart at the sound of her cry, their eyes wide with shock, but it was too late. The damage was done. Adisa stood there, her body trembling, her mind a whirl of disbelief and rage. She had seen it with her own eyes. The truth had come crashing down on her like a thunderstorm, and there was no escape from the pain that swelled inside her chest. The fallout expanded, the village descended into chaos in the wake of the discovery. The once peaceful community was torn between whispers of disbelief and shock. People gathered in hushed groups, trying to make sense of the horror that had unfolded under the cover of darkness. No one knew what to say, what to think, and the air was thick with uncertainty. How could such a thing have happened? Was it a misunderstanding, a trick of the mind? Jabari and Amina denied any wrongdoing, both insisting they had been framed. They claimed that they were innocent, that they had been caught in some sort of trap, but no one believed them. The villagers were too stunned, too disgusted by the sight of the two of them together in that way. Rumors spread like wildfire, and soon, the damage to Jabari and Amina's reputations was irreparable. But for Adisa, there was no room for doubt. The betrayal had shattered something deep within her. How could she ever look Jabari in the eyes again? How could she ever forgive Amina, her own flesh and blood? Her heart, once full of love and trust, was now a hollow shell, filled with nothing but betrayal and bitterness. She could not, would not, allow the stain of this dishonor to remain in her home, in her life. Adisa, consumed by anger and heartbreak, took swift and unforgiving action. She banished Jabari from the village, her voice cold and resolute as she told him to leave, to never return. His pleas fell on deaf ears, for no apology could undo what he had done. He had broken their bond in the worst possible way, and there was no place for him in the life they had shared. Jabari left without a word, disappearing into the forest as the village watched, some with pity, others with judgment. As for Amina, Adisa's fury was just as fierce. She sent her daughter away, to live with her aunt in a neighboring town, far from the village that would never look at her the same way again. Amina, still in shock, was unable to comprehend the full weight of her actions, but Adisa didn't care. She was no longer the mother who loved unconditionally, she was the woman who had been betrayed, and there was no place for weakness in her heart. Dauda, watching from the shadows, smiled to himself. His plan had come to fruition perfectly. The village that had once been united was now torn apart, the family he had set his sights on broken beyond repair. His influence, his words, had poisoned the hearts of those who had once known only love and trust. He had watched as the seeds of doubt had taken root, and now, the harvest of chaos was his to claim. But little did Dauda know that the ancestors, who watched over the lives of the villagers and the land itself, had seen the treachery he had sown. Their eyes were not blind, and they were not without mercy. They saw the pain he had caused, the destruction he had wrought. And as Dauda reveled in his success, he could not know that his time was running out. The balance of the village, the harmony of its people, would not be so easily destroyed, and the ancestors would soon see to it that the trickster's reign of deception came to an end. One night, Adisa fell into a deep, restless sleep, her heart heavy with the weight of betrayal and confusion. She tossed and turned, the images of what she had seen haunting her every thought. But in the midst of her turmoil, she was transported into a strange and vivid dream. She found herself standing in a vast, sunlit field, where the air was thick with the scent of wildflowers, and the earth beneath her feet was soft and warm. Around her, hundreds of golden calabashes, their smooth surfaces shimmering in the light, dotted the landscape like forgotten treasures. As she stood there, unsure of what was happening, a figure appeared before her, a woman whose age was impossible to measure. Her face was deeply lined, her eyes filled with wisdom that seemed to stretch back through time. Her skin was dark and rich, like the earth itself, and her presence radiated calm authority. Adisa, the woman spoke, her voice like the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. You have been deceived. The man you trusted has poisoned your heart with lies. You must see the truth before it is too late. Adisa's breath caught in her throat, the words cutting through the fog of her confusion like a blade. She had been deceived. The weight of her grief pressed in on her, and for a moment, she could not speak. The elderly woman nodded, understanding the pain that held Adisa captive. Look into the calabashes, the woman said gently. They will show you the truth. The truth that you have been blind to. Adisa walked toward the nearest calabash, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch its smooth, golden surface. As her fingers brushed against it, the calabash seemed to hum, as if alive, and when she lifted it to her eyes, she saw a vision unfold before her. Inside the calabash, Dauda stood, his face twisted into a cruel smirk. He was whispering words into Adisa's ear, his voice soft and insidious, his words like poison dripping into her mind. Jabari does not care for you, Adisa. Amina has betrayed you, just as he has. They have been lying to you, using your love against you. His voice echoed in her mind as the image shifted, and Adisa could feel the weight of the lies pressing against her heart. Her chest tightened with the realization that she had been manipulated, by Dauda, the very man who had come into their lives with gifts and stories, who had sown the seeds of doubt and division. He had crafted this illusion, this cruel mirage that had made her turn against her own family. With tears brimming in her eyes, Adisa put the first calabash down and moved to another. This time, when she peered inside, she saw Jabari and Amina, not as she had imagined them, but as they truly were. They were standing together, their faces filled with love and sincerity, their bond unshaken. In this vision, she saw them holding each other, not in secret, but in the light of truth, their love for her and for each other unwavering. She saw the warmth in Jabari's eyes when he looked at her, the tenderness in Amina's smile as she had always known them. This was the truth. This was the love she had feared had been lost, but it was still there, pure and whole. Adisa's heart shattered as she realized the extent of her mistake. The pain, the anger, the doubt, those had all been sown by Dauda's lies. He had manipulated her, using the very love she had for her family as a weapon to drive them apart. Tears spilled from her eyes as she gazed at the calabashes, feeling the weight of her own sorrow. The elderly woman's voice echoed softly behind her. Now you see the truth, Adisa. The darkness that has clouded your heart can be lifted, but only if you share what you have seen. Only then will the healing begin. The reunion. Adisa awoke with a start, her breath coming in quick gasps. The dream had been so vivid, so real, that she could still feel the warmth of the golden calabashes in her hands and the weight of the truth pressing on her chest. As the last remnants of the dream faded away, she knew with certainty what she had to do. Without wasting a moment, Adisa set out to find Jabari and Amina. She had to make things right. The love that had once defined their family had not been lost, it had been clouded, distorted by the lies of the trickster. Now, she had the truth, and with it, she would bring them back together. When she found them, Jabari and Amina were sitting by the edge of the village, their faces etched with sorrow and confusion, each grappling with the fallout of Adisa's decision to banish them. They looked up at her as she approached, and Adisa could see the raw pain in their eyes, the same pain that had filled her own heart until the truth had revealed itself to her in the dream. "I have seen the truth," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I was wrong, both of you. Dauda tricked me. He used dark magic to deceive me, to make me believe things that weren't real. He wanted to tear us apart. But we are stronger than that. We are family." Tears filled Amina's eyes as she stood, her arms reaching out to her mother. "Mama, we never wanted to hurt you. We love you, and we love Papa." Jabari, too, stood, his face full of regret but also hope. "Adisa, I would never betray you. I swear to you, there was never anything between Amina and me. We were only ever